Friends, there has been quite a lot of concerns and doubts from the general public with regards to the availability of various fuel products, especially the cooking gas LPG, in the aftermath of the war between Iran and Israel and the restrictions of tanker movement through the Strait of Hormuz. This video, I'm just trying to cover a few of general doubts on these aspects without going too much into technical details. As you may be aware, the oil refineries process crude oil and convert it into various products. If you start from very light products going down to heavy products, start with fuel gas, then LPG or cooking gas, naphtha, kerosene, aviation turbine fuels, petrol, diesel, fuel oil, bitumen, petroleum coke, etc. They also make various other petrochemicals, aromatics. Each refinery is designed based on a particular design configuration and based on a particular type of crude oil or variety of crude oils. So, depending on the type of crude oil actually being processed and the design of the configuration available, quantity of each products being produced are also almost fixed. Of course, a little bit of tweaking here and there is possible, but not a big amount of variation possible. If you see, in the Indian refineries generally are designed to maximize diesel and petrol. So generally, if you look at the product configuration, petrol, diesel and aviation turbine fuel almost form 70 to 80% of the production, whereas LPG production is only 5% or so, or maximum 10%, again depending on the type of configuration, different units. Refineries without having secondary processing facilities like cracking units may have lesser amount of LPG being produced. In India today, we have almost 23 refineries processing close to 250 million metric ton per annum of crude oil of various qualities. Because of this huge refining capacity, we produce petrol, diesel, aviation turbine fuel, etc., meeting complete domestic demand, and also we are able to export a part of it. However, when it comes to LPG cooking gas, configurations are not really designed to increase LPG production beyond a particular limit. Therefore, LPG production is meeting only 40% of our domestic demand, which means that almost 60% of our domestic demand of LPG is being met by import of LPG from outside countries. However, in the case of petrol and diesel, that is not the same. We have excess production. There is a possibility of slightly increasing LPG components by tweaking the production. The LPG is essentially made of C3 and C4 hydrocarbon chain molecules, which means propane, propylene, butane, butylene. Some of these elements are usually used for converting into more value-added products of petrochemicals and things like that. So some sort of tweaking is possible. So present contingency, government has given strict orders to all the refineries to maximize the LPG production. Refineries are also running more than 100% capacity utilizations. In the bargain, they could increase the LPG production overall by more than 25% or even 30-35% increase has happened. But still, we are still short of LPG to meet all the domestic demand. That is why more than 50% of LPG still needs to be imported to meet. So government is giving priority allocations for household domestic usages, which means that industrial usages are slightly cut. You know, there is also, because of the present scenario, panic buying, panic booking, hoarding and things like that is happening. As you know, 60% of the LPG is being imported. We said out of that almost 90% comes from countries like Saudi Arabia or Qatar and all, which means any problem with respect to the Strait of Hormuz would definitely affect our LPG movement through tankers. Similarly, crude oil also, almost 88% of our crude oil requirement is being imported, and a major part comes from countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and UAE. Of course, of late we have increased our imports from countries like Russia, USA and all. Even LPG also we have started sourcing from other countries. As far as crude oil is concerned, since we are importing from more than 40 countries all around, we are not really dependent on movement of these tankers completely from Strait of Hormuz. Whereas in the case of LPG and LNG, it is a bit different. Even in the case of LNG also, we are importing almost 40%, and a major part of it is coming through Strait of Hormuz. So here also we have diversified the sourcing of LNG from various places. In the bargain, what is going to happen ultimately if the war continues for a long time? We are still going to find pressure on cooking gas LPG, and to a lesser extent the availability of LNG or piped natural gas. But from the crude oil point of view, definitely we are not going to have any problem, or even the availability of petrol and diesel, which is going to be refined out from the crude oil, we are not going to have much of a problem. You know, the number of tankers required for LPG import is almost 29-30 tankers per month. In the case of crude oil, it can be, you know, maybe all over India, the total, if you take, it should be 2 to 3 tankers per day. Import requirement is so huge. One of the reasons is mainly because our exploration in India, exploration and generation of crude oil or LNG is very limited in India. As we can see, less than 25% of the oil requirement and less than 40% of the gas requirement is being met by domestic exploration and production. There is some good news in places like Andaman Nicobar and other places. There are some new findings coming up. So there is a lot of hope for the future, wherein we can become self-reliant by increasing the exploration of oil and gas in India. Also, it is important that we should keep on increasing the strategic reserves. As of now, we have sufficient reserves, strategic reserve for exigency requirement for crude oil. For LPG, it is slightly less than what it should be. There is a requirement for further increasing the storage capacities of LPG. So these strategic crude reserves gives us some cushion. In the case of crude oil, almost 50-60 days of cushion in case of an exigency. Even the refineries, individual refineries are also holding huge inventories of crude oil and products. But as far as LPG storage is concerned, we still have a lot of limitations. There is also a need to increase the usage of alternate fuels, especially cooking fuel. You can see most of the developed countries, they are entirely dependent on piped natural gas or electricity as cooking medium. Gradually, we also have to come out of the dependency on LPG for household cooking fuel in India. Also, we have to look at alternate sources of energy like biomass, hydrogen fuel. Hydrogen holds a big promise in the future as a source of energy, not only industrial and household and vehicles, transportation, everything. We have to really work on the renewable sources of energy to reduce the dependence on the fossil fuels. Piped natural gas is essentially methane. There is a lot of gas being produced in India, and almost 40% of LNG is being imported. The problem with PNG is in the infrastructure required, the piping infrastructure required by city gas distribution systems. So we are catching up on that. There is a lot of convenience of PNG over and above the LPG usage, because you can avoid cylinders, transportation of huge amount of LPG, because piping and pipe transportation of LNG is much simpler and more convenient for people. Cost point of view also, LNG is almost 20 to 30% cheaper than LPG, but the initial infrastructure cost is very high in case of piped natural gas. Even electricity will work out to be cheaper as a cooking medium compared to LPG or LNG. Regarding ethanol blending, although the energy value of ethanol is 30% less than the petrol, so there could be slight, very minor reduction in the mileage. It will not be significant when you add only up to 10 or 20% ethanol into petrol. Similarly, ethanol is having a higher octane number, so the cars designed with a higher octane number has a specific advantage there. The hygroscopic nature or the water absorbing nature of the ethanol is known to create some problems with respect to some engine parts, but then the newly designed cars are well taken care of all these requirements. Benefit of ethanol has to be looked at into overall environmental benefits and how ethanol sourcing will affect the agricultural production. In fact, today the sourcing of ethanol is not cheaper than petrol prices. So even cost-wise, there need not be much of an advantage. But the dependency on fossil fuel can be reduced by usage of more ethanol. The pricing part of it, how we look at it, the war situation, how it is going to affect. Just to make you understand, major part of the crude oil is imported. When the products are produced and transferred from refinery gate, the prices of the products are fixed based on the international product prices. Although the products are not imported, the pricing is calculated based on the import and export parity price in the ratio of 80:20. That is a trade parity pricing. Oil marketing companies purchases these products from the refinery gate and they sell it at the retail price. Crude oil prices are increasing, correspondingly international product prices are increasing, so the export import parity prices will also increase. So if the retail prices are kept fixed without changing by the government, then the oil companies are going to suffer quite a lot. So to guard them, the government ultimately may be pressurized to increase the retail prices if the war continues for a long time. Crude oil price remains so high, like 100 plus, like what is happening today. Uh, Otherwise, if the government really wants the retail prices to be kept same, then the losses have to be absorbed mainly by the oil marketing companies and to some extent by the refineries. And if subsidies are given, the government has to bear the losses. They may also, charge some windfall taxes on the upstream oil exploration companies like ONGC to compensate to some extent so that the retail prices can be kept the same. Hope whatever I have told with regards to the LPG and fuel products and the pricing is useful. Because of the paucity of time, I am not able to go into details. Probably we will come out with each of the small topics in detailed videos at a later date. Thank you.